All right, guys, welcome back to the Handcrafted Podcast. Again, the Handcrafted Podcast is brought to you by the Handcrafted Network. It's an online classroom and network of makers who are all working together collaboratively to grow their businesses. I've created a bunch of online modules, everything from running ads to shipping things to sales strategy, marketing, all of that sort of stuff. It's a classroom section, and there's a nice community section where you get to connect with other people, and we do calls twice a month. So Handcrafted Network, if you have any questions, Paul at thehandcraftednetwork.com. All right, so today on the podcast, I was talking to somebody actually who was recently joining the network, and they kind of were asking me what my silver bullet was, or what sort of the tipping point was with my business. And, you know, it was a pretty long answer, so I figured maybe this is a great podcast episode idea. And I know a lot of you guys are, maybe just starting out. You're kind of in different places. You know, some people have a few employees, some people have no employees, some people have a lot of employees. And to me, this kind of advice is something that I took to heart when somebody else told me this too. So I just kind of wanted to pass it along and share and talk about my sort of philosophy with it all. So I like to picture sort of a seesaw with two buckets on the end. So one bucket is filled with water and the other one's empty. So if you can imagine the seesaw is tilted one way, obviously the way towards the bucket that has water in it. And if you could picture water just slowly dripping into the other bucket, eventually it's going to be one drop that appears to tip the whole thing over. But it's really the culmination of work, and it's the effort that it takes, drop after drop. You can't say it was the last drop that you put in. You can't say that it was the first drop you put in. It was actually basically the compounding of the amount of work and the amount of effort that you put in. And I heard this analogy, and I thought it was super helpful for me to understand, okay, it's about just sort of setting achievable goals and achieving them. I think all of us sort of set out to be like, hey, where's the silver bullet? Where's the quick win? We're all bombarded by the advertisements of quick weight loss, quick ways to make money, quick ways to, do this or do that. And to me, there really is no quick way. There is no silver bullet. I wish there was. If there was, I would 100% share it with you. But there isn't really anything in particular that really helped me tip over the edge, helped me go from, and there are a few tipping points really. If you kind of look at the projection of my company and how I grew it, you have the inflection point of going from part-time to full-time. You have the inflection point of me bringing on new employees. You have the inflection point of me moving from one shop to the next. You have the inflection point of me hiring my first salary position, and then hiring a designer, and then, increasing shop space. So there's multiple inflection points along the way. So asking at what point did it tip feels kind of like a loaded question, really. Now, there are a few things I can attribute to things that like really helped get me from certain places along the way. But at the end of the day, I think I attribute it to just pretty much persistence, working hard, finding ways to achieve the things that you want to achieve. So let's rewind. How can we create actionable steps here for you to follow? Because obviously you could be like, hey, Paul, cool, great, you worked hard. So what? Like that I am too. So I think it's a matter of figuring out where you want to go and then working backwards. So let's take, for example, you're at and we could kind of take them in each individual stage. So say you're a part-time maker. You have a few things, maybe you're working in a garage. How do you get to that tipping point? How do you get beyond? So for me, when I started doing it, what happened was I've told this many times, it was friends, and then friends of friends, and then eventually complete strangers. So what sort of started to create the tipping point was when I had enough work to do that was basically replacing what my daily income was. I had a little bit of a different situation. I was kind of always a part-time sort of gig worker. I did work as a teacher. I was in the music industry for a long time too, and I could talk about that in another podcast if you guys have some questions about that as well. But I was in that for a long time, so I was really able to sort of split my time 50-50 between making furniture and having a job per se, another job. And what slowly started to happen was it slowly started to incrementally add up, and it's like, how do you get those early people, and how do you get those things that eventually add. So what I talked about this before, and I think maybe on the last podcast or 2 podcasts ago when I was talking about scaling, and it's a matter of like figuring out how you get that first client, working backwards. And once you get that first client, how do you turn that one client into 2 more? How do you turn it into 3 more? So the entire time that I was, sanding or building something, there's tons of downtime. So for me, I was like, okay, how do I turn this piece into 2 more pieces? So what I would do is in my head think about, okay, I could get some good photos, I could get some a really good review, I can ask for a referral. So all of these sorts of things, I continued to grow. So what started happening is each one of those projects was like another drip in the bucket. There wasn't any particular idea that started to take off. There wasn't any particular ad that I ran or anything like that. So that all started to build and compound. One of the big inflection points that I can trace back to is I started to pivot what my brand strategy was. And I talk about this a lot in the group and on the podcast, is I started pivoting my brand strategy towards more of a narrative thing and away from e-commerce. So a lot of us start these businesses and think, oh, we need to set up an e-commerce site. It's all about SEO and it's all about selling things direct to consumers, like we sell sneakers or sheets or anything else like that. But furniture is a little bit different because it's big. So, for me doing furniture, it wasn't necessarily selling direct to consumer. If you have cutting boards and those sorts of things, this may apply a little bit better. I mean, whatever I'm about to say may not apply. But for me, it was really switching away from that sort of e-commerce click buy mentality. I was for a long time so fixated on like, why are people just not purchasing? Why are people just not clicking buy on my products? And what happened was I slowly started to pivot towards more about the storytelling, more about the why, more about who we are. And at the time I recorded it's still on the Philadelphia Table Company Instagram page. It's pinned in it. So you feel free to go check it out. It's also at the philadelphiatablecompany.com/about page. You could click on it and it sort of tells the story. So at the time when I was like, I need to start telling story, I need to start leaning into craft, I need to start saying, hey, this is art. This isn't just like, furniture that you can get anywhere. So I paid to get this really great video done. And to me, that's where it really felt like a positive inflection point. Because for the first time, I was able to really put the brand out there and focus the brand in a way that I wanted to. And what I started doing was just like gentle like boosting on Instagram, making sure it was on the website. And it's great to like record these videos, but it's like, what do you do with it after that? How do you use it to get more people? So I started passing it around. I started sending it to interior designers. I started sending it to other people. And what happened was the content was so good that it started creating a brand story around who we are, what we do, what we represent. And I talked about this in a previous episode where it's about having edges. It's about having a perspective. It's about having a point of view. And all that stuff sort of comes across in this video. I want to re-record it now that I know a little bit better as to like who we are and what we're doing. But that video really helped me solidify what it was that where I wanted to go, and started bringing in a lot of really great business and really great traffic to the site for people, the right kind of people, like the right kind of clients. So that was a really helpful inflection point for me and like a really critical breaking point. Another really critical inflection point for me was when I was able to take the time away from the shop and start focusing on sales full time. So focusing on sales full time allowed me to make sure that the queue is always full, that we always had work to do, and it really just became my top focus. So what I would do is I would sit and say, hey, how do I get a sale today? How do I close something today? And I still do this to this day. I think a lot of sales and a lot of kind of moving the ball down the field, if you will, is just taking shots on goal and just constant persistence. So it's like sitting down day after day saying, hey, how do I get to X? How do I hit $100,000? How do I hit $500,000? How do I hit $1 million? How do I hit 2 million? How do I hit 10 million? And reverse engineering and figuring out and knowing what that goal is and figuring out what little incremental goals you can do along the way to get to where you need to go. So, we talked about this on the scaling episode a little while back where I was talking about breaking down your monthly sales goals into like weekly sales goals. And that was really, really important to me. It really helped me focus on, okay, if my goal really is $1 million, and this is what helped me get across the $1 million threshold a little while ago. And what really, really helped me focus on that was I knew I had to sell X to get there. And I was willing to do anything that it took to get those deals, to close those deals, to push beyond that thing. And I also, in that sort of interim, it's sort of like going to the gym. Like I developed and learned my sort of sales muscle. I learned how to communicate with people. I learned how to sell products and add value. And I really kind of learned the ins and outs of that because it was just reps and reps and reps and reps of trying to sell to different people. And I know a lot of people are basically saying, like, how did you get people in the door? How did people come in? And remember, all of this was sort of compounding from what I had done before. And if you go back and listen to the podcast that I talked about, the scaling, that's really where I talk a lot about how you can bring more people in the door and how you can slowly close them and delight them. And so those were kind of the two main inflection points. Another big inflection point for me, another big groundbreaking perspective for me was when I hired an operations person. So I hired someone to do operations for me. He was a previous employee on the shop floor. And what that did was it allowed me to have the capacity to just do sales. I didn't have to worry about wondering when this stuff was going to get made, how it was going to get made, where it was going to get to where it had to go to. It allowed me to really just open up my mind and do full capacity, full bore sales stuff. So I think, like, looking back, talking through this, that's where the major inflection point was when I started fully focusing on sales and I started focusing on operations and systems. And, something really critical that I think I need to point out here is, prior to all of this stuff, prior to me doing this video, prior to me caring about this, I was so deep into like making the stuff. My head was so down in, getting dusty and making these things that it was hard for me to come up for air and like focus on the business. And one of the really big key takeaways I think I learned from one of my previous coaches was you need to take time to work on the business and not work in the business. If you're spending too much time in the business and not working on the business, it's never going to grow. And you're going to always be the one that's making the things and then never allowing it to grow. So that's sort of the tough part. I know all of us, I would assume most of you guys listening to this are all makers. And I know we come to this from the perspective of we love making things. So I'm never telling you if you're doing what you love and you're doing your passion, I'm never telling you to pull yourself away from that. But what I'm saying is, if you're not able to do the sales and you prefer to be making the things, find someone who will do the sales. Find someone who will do the operations. If you don't want to do the sales, but you want to do the operations, find someone to do the sales, find someone to make the stuff. And it's really putting these pieces together and outlining it and putting a plan in place to say, this is where I want to go. I was kind of for me, it was weird because I never really was like a planner. I never really was like, oh, this is where I want to be in 2 years. This is where I want to be in 5 years. But these are all things that I think we need to all consider when we are starting these businesses and when we're running these businesses. We need to know where they're going to go. Otherwise, we're dedicating tons and tons of time, tons of resources to making this happen. And if you don't have a clear perspective and a clear view of where you want to be in 5 years or where you want to be in 10 years, and I'm not saying you have to have it all figured out now, but if you don't know sort of where those inflection points are, hey, I want to be here by here, I want to be here by here, and work towards those, then you're going to be lost. And what's going to happen is 5 years is going to go by, 10 years is going to go by, and you'll be like, holy crap, I just wasted all of this time just trying to get by. So I think, a big piece of advice I'd love for you to take away from this, and I know we deviated a little bit, is to really take time to work on the business, really take time to think about what those sort of next steps are. And I think that's really where those inflection points are. That's the silver bullet, I guess, that I can share with you, which is focus on growing the business, set those goals, set achievable goals and achieve them. And you'll slowly start to realize, you'll start to look back. I mean, I've been doing this for 10 years and I look back, sometimes I walk around my shop, I'm like, holy crap, I don't know how we got here. But I do know, if I look down and incrementally break it down, I do know it was a lot of time, it was a lot of determination, it was a lot of effort, it was a lot of time, it was a lot of planning. But at the end of the day, you want to know where you're going. That's the only way you're going to get there. All right, guys, hope this was helpful today. If you have any questions for me, feel free to email me, paul@thehandcraftednetwork.com. It's great to talk to you guys again, and it's also been really great getting to meet a lot of you guys in the community. So that's been amazing, learning where you guys are, what you guys are doing, what you guys are working on, what your individual problems are. All that stuff is super cool to me, super fascinating. It's sort of my favorite part of all of this. So I hope you are enjoying the podcast. I can't even believe I'm saying this, but please click the subscribe button. I've heard so many podcasters say that, but it really does help grow a podcast like this. And it's also been amazing to see how much this podcast has grown. It seems like there's a really great need out there for that. So again, thank you for the support. I'm going to continue to do these weekly as much as I possibly can, as sustainably as I possibly can. But the only way for me to do that is for you guys to click subscribe. So thank you so much for listening, and I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.